This morning we have Miss Pim Jansen joining us. Welcome, Pim. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm all right, I guess. It's 4 a.m. here, so we'll see if I'll be able to answer any questions at all.
Are you behind? It looks light out though. Are you in a place where there's sunshine at 4 a.m. or is that a fake? Is that a virtual
It's fake.
background?
Just fake.
Oh, it looks pretty real. Well, that's a good job. And
It
you
looks like a really nice office. I wish I was there.
and you are in New Zealand, correct? Is that
Yeah,
correct? Yeah. So
yeah.
Kia ora. I once lived there for a couple of years, many years ago. But I lived in the North Island, up in a little town
Nice.
called Cambridge, which is Waikato. About an hour and a half south of Auckland, as I recall, or an hour south of Auckland, maybe, perhaps. So
You probably know better than me. I'm Swedish from the beginning, so I've only
I
been here
see.
for 2.5 years myself.
Gotcha. Okay, and that makes sense with the last name Jansen. So son
Yeah.
of Jan. Well, tell us a little bit about your background, if you don't mind.
Right. So, as I said, I'm Swedish. I grew up in Sweden and I was there until about 12, 15 years ago. And yeah, I guess I could say that I've been a sugar addict since a very young age. My whole life has actually revolved around food. And the only thing I can tell you, because I don't remember a lot of things from my childhood, is that I know that from a very, very young age, I loved sweet things. And I remember I might have been 5 or 6 years old, I was just getting up early because my mom is a late sleeper. I was climbing on the chairs and I was like reaching into the cupboards because I knew she was always hiding the cookies in there. And I was like having to navigate around the crisp breads and other things. And then I would steal 1 or 2 cookies so that she wouldn't notice. So this kind of perpetuated throughout my life. I was always interested in sports. I was interested in nutrition. When I was maybe 10, I said I had my 2 favorite books. One was a cookbook. The other one was a book that actually taught me how to count calories at this age. So I figured out I can eat whatever I want, this amount of calories, and I won't get fat. So that started quite early for me. And yeah, then I went on to have a career as a personal trainer. I worked as a diet advisor and I was never fat because of that. But my diet wasn't great. I was always eating a bit of chocolate or something else that contained sugar. And at my worst, I think I always woke up every morning and my joints were always really, really sore. And I thought it was overtraining because I was training a lot. But thinking back now, maybe it wasn't just the training, it's probably all of the sugar that I ate as well. So yeah, I kind of justify that with, you know, I'm training a lot, I'm exercising, I'm healthy, I'm eating a good diet, apart from the cherry on top, which might not have done me any good. And I think the very first time I tried out keto was probably around 18 years ago, because low carb, high fat was quite a big thing in Sweden at the time. And I was studying nutrition at the university at the time, and we didn't do any of that. That was just not, I know I had one classmate that was kind of looking into that, but everyone was just dismissing it as, oh, it's just a fad diet. It's nothing that you have to worry about. But I was curious anyway, so I tried it and I lost weight, which was good. That was encouraging. But I also noticed that my cravings were going away. And at this time, I was also working one evening, and Wednesday evening in a bakery to get extra money, and every other Saturday. So I didn't eat anything when I was at work, and I was happy about it until I got a bit of hybris, and I tried one, and I thought, wow, it didn't actually toss me into a binge like it normally does. So that's cool. I can do this. And then the next week when I came back to work, I had another bite, and that just snowballed straight back into it. So I guess pretty much sums up 10 years of my existence going on and off keto with binges every here and there, a lot of keto sweets, trying to satisfy that sugar craving that I had, that you probably know keto sweets are not going to do it. And yeah, until maybe 3 years ago when I came across a brilliant life coach, and it wasn't about the cravings at all, but I noticed that I'm actually an emotional eater, and I never knew this. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think most of us can relate, particularly the trying to sneak a bite of something and then kind of making sure make it look like we didn't actually have any, trying to fool the other people. Yeah, I ate some of it, but I kind of adjusted it or moved the bag around a little bit so it didn't look like I got in there. Yeah, I think we can all relate to that. This sort of sugar addiction, or and sugar addiction is extremely common. We had Karen Thompson on not too long ago, and I know that was an issue she dealt with. What do you think is going on physiologically? I mean, why do we crave sweets? There's people out there that will claim, the reason we crave sugar and sweets is because it's an essential part of our diet. We have to have sugar in the diet. We have to have certainly carbohydrate in the diet to operate. If we don't, then all kinds of bad things happen to us. We become hypothyroid. We become overrun with excess cortisol. We have gluconeogenesis that has to occur if we're not eating them, and that's stressful on the body long term. What are your thoughts physiologically as to why people are addicted to sugar and sweets, and what happens if we decide not to eat that stuff? Is it bad for us?
Well, I think everything that you just mentioned, all the excuses that people have for eating sugar, I think they can be real for some people, but I don't think that is a natural state. I think that is because we have damaged our bodies metabolically for so many years that now they don't function properly. I do, however, believe that it's probably reversible for most people. So naturally, we would crave anything that is energy dense, so which is, carbohydrates, fatty things, preferably in combination, but it doesn't actually occur that often in nature. You can think about nuts maybe, but most of the time, if you find berries or something, they're not going to be very fatty. So just not to get into it too much, but the brain chemistry, or the brain, you have a reward center up in the brain, which basically, as soon as you eat something or you do something that is pleasurable, that feels good, that will help your survival, you will get a release of dopamine in your brain and a few other brain chemicals, but mainly dopamine. And that will make you feel good. So that will kind of put your learning on, you'll start learning very, very quickly. Oh, this was a good thing. I want to do it again. So the next time you come by whatever it was that you ate or did at the time, you will get this dopamine release almost before you're actually eating it to kind of reinforce you to go for it again. So when you take a carbohydrate and you refine it into sugar or any other refined food for that matter, you will basically boost this signal. So if that was on a scale from 1 to 10, a 4, now we have something that boosts your dopamine up to a 10. And that feels very, very good. Your brain doesn't really know what it's doing with it. It will start down-regulate the dopamine receptors to not get such a strong signal. And then you're going to get more and more addicted to it, because every time you need to eat more of this food to get the same satisfaction. So that's kind of what is happening up in your brain. But physiologically, you also get the hormonal response. So you have the insulin and the leptin and all of those hormones that work together. And they're just going to be all over the place. And the more you do it, the more dysregulated they're going to become. So that part, I think most people can fix this with the diet very, very quickly. Go on a low carb or keto or carnivore diet for 2 or 3 weeks, and most people don't have those kind of cravings. It's the psychological cravings, the emotional eating that is still there, the habits, and oh my God, I'm going to go crazy if I'm not getting chocolate right now. So I always want to distinguish between the two, because I think they're very, very different. So that's why I felt so good the first time I did keto, because it took care of the hormonal bit, I think. But then I think my brain was just trying to talk me into, oh yeah, this is going really well. Now, maybe you should just have another bite. You're not going to fall back into it. And then I do. And it's been doing that, and it's still doing that. You have to be aware of it. You have to manage it, and you will be fine. But as soon as you let your guard down, you're probably with your face down the ice cream bucket again.
Let's talk a little bit about maybe artificial sweeteners, because many of them do not have a significant insulin impact or glucose impact. They all seem to stimulate something called the sweet taste receptor that we have in our mouth. There is a cephalic phase of digestion, and when we think about food, when we see food, digestion actually starts. And so, there's different people that can handle that differently. What are your thoughts on those items as being used as maybe as a crutch, as a substitute? Are they good? Are they bad? Does it have a place in the diet of someone who is maybe a sugar addict, or should that be something that's completely eliminated?
Okay, this is a can of worms, but yeah, I don't like them. I do have stevia in my house, and if I ever drink coffee, I'm using stevia. Having said that, I spent many years using erythritol, xylitol, and stevia, and I just actually did an experiment maybe 6-8 months ago on myself, and I just ate a bunch of cream after 16 hours of fasting, and basically my blood sugar slowly went up very, very slowly over time. And I did the same thing the day after with stevia in it, just to see how I reacted, and it just went up a slight bit and then down again. So I definitely have a response to having stevia in my diet. And I think that is very, very individual. Some people won't react, other people will react. But what it does do is that whenever you're eating something sweet, you're still going to get a physiological response, because your sweet receptors are experiencing it as something sweet, as if you are eating sugar. They don't know about sweeteners, that they are non-caloric or artificial or whatever. They just there to stimulate it. So you will still get this response in your brain. And one problem is that when you do that, you have something that we call neurological pathways. So it's kind of a learned behavior. So if I drive past the bakery, I will have a thought that is, I need to go and buy a cinnamon roll or whatever. I'll stop, I get in, I get that, and I will eat it. So that is a whole neurological pathway. And that will just, every time I do that, that will be reinforced. And that is a set of behaviors that will occur at the same time every time I drive past the bakery. And that will kind of create the cravings every time I see a bakery. So that is just a trigger now. And you can do that with sweeteners as well. And you're trying to substitute those sweeteners, and you just pretty much transfer this neurological pathway into something else that you're going to be addicted to. So I've had a few clients that aren't addicted to sugar anymore, but they're addicted to keto treats, or the bulletproof bars or Quest bars or whatever it is, because they are sweet and that's their substitute. So from a physiological standpoint, it's probably better. And I think it might have a place for people that can't go cold turkey, or them, are not ready to actually quit sugar, because it can be really, really painful, believe me. But I wish that they weren't there so that we didn't have to use them. I wish that we didn't have them. But having said that, I do think that for many people, we have to go from eating a lot of sugar to do the sweeteners and then kind of stepwise going down. But if you're going to quit sugar and you can do it straight away, I think that is probably the way to go. I don't think any artificial sweeteners are good for your body. Stevia is probably one of the better ones, in my opinion. Having said that, I know people that get migraines from it. I know someone got a rash from it. So some people are just sensitive to those alkaloids in the stevia extract. So preferably not, but I can see a use for them.
Yeah, the other, the issue. I mean, interesting. You said at the beginning you were having cream and that was sending your blood glucose up a bit. But I think, no one sort of consumes stevia by itself. I mean, there's not people putting drops of stevia on their tongue. I mean, they're
Yeah.
usually mixing it with some other food. And, obviously it could be what they're mixing it with as well. I mean, because, like I said, one of the common things we see in the low carb ketogenic community is to take these artificial sweeteners and mix them up with usually a fat source. Usually it's something, maybe a dairy source, coffee, something along those lines. And it could be the combination of what they're doing, because I'm not putting stevia on my steaks. I mean, there's this,
No.
there's no point in doing that. And so I wonder if it's not just the stevia, but it's what we're adding it to. And I want you to expand upon. Well, let's just talk about dairy a little bit. Do you find that dairy is helpful, problematic? A lot of back and forth around dairy. Many of us find that we do better just actually without dairy, but there's some that seem to do okay with it. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh God. I'm always I have a couple of people on my channels that are very knowledgeable about dairy, that do raw dairy, and they love it. Personally, seem to be sensitive to whey protein of all things, so I'm not doing well with dairy. But what I do see in general is that dairy is one of those foods that people tend to, if they quit sugar, they're going to be addicted to caffeine, dairy, or nuts or something like that. So that's one aspect, because you have the casein can turn into caseinamorphin in the body, etc. So it's actually quite addictive. So that's one aspect. But I do see a lot of people that don't want to cut out that last bit of cream in the coffee, and they can't lose weight, and then they finally do it and the weight just comes off. And I don't think it has anything to do with the caloric content. It's probably just that they're sensitive to something in the dairy, even cream. I think, if you're going to do dairy, raw is probably better, but I don't think most people do well with dairy. And now I say that with a pinch of salt, from what I've seen anyway.
That's I think that statement is pretty safe for a large percentage of people. There are some people out there that will tell you that raw dairy is the best thing in the world, and it's what fix something X, Y, or Z, and certainly I don't discount their personal experiences. And we had a person named Sally Fallon on from the Weston A. Price Foundation a couple of days ago, and she is a big advocate of dairy, particularly raw dairy. Most of us, I think, are not used to raw dairy, at least in the United States. I don't know about Sweden or New Zealand. I suspect raw dairy is maybe more. I don't know if it's more accessible or less accessible. I don't know what the situation is. When I live in New Zealand, I can't honestly remember. I can remember as a kid, they would deliver milk bottles when I was visiting a place like South Africa, where my mother is from. And I remember that, would have the cream on the top, and I assume that was raw, but maybe I'm mistaken. But I don't know what the situation is over there. You're shaking your head. Maybe New Zealand is all 100% pasteurized. I don't know.
Not 100%. So I lived there on the west coast for a while on the South Island, and we actually lived quite close to. I didn't even visit there, but they were selling some raw dairy there, and they had this. I know I was reading on the website, they had kind of like a vending machine that you just put your money in and you get a bottle of milk, basically. I didn't try it out because I know that I'm not doing well with whey protein, so I don't imagine that would kind of make a difference whether it's raw or not. It's still whey protein for me, so I'm trying to stay away from that as much as possible. I eat mostly butter if I'm eating any dairy, and that seems to be fine. So there is some raw dairy here, but now I live further up in Nelson, so that's top of the South Island, and as far as I know, I don't know of any raw dairy farmers or where you could get your hands on it here. I'm sure it's possible if you do some research, but there are probably a lot of rules and regulations around that as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in New Zealand back in the early 1990s, I remember I was playing rugby, but I had a lot of side jobs because it wasn't a well-paying job back then. I had a little bit of stuff from that, but I actually went and sheared goats and sheep, and I went with a dairyman and went around delivering dairy, and I was a garbage man and ran behind garbage trucks, and I was a bartender. I did a little bit of dug ditches, everything, I could while I was there. But I can't remember what the experience with the dairy. And I know we were picking up milk or directly from the farmers, but I don't know when we brought it where it was going to. Let me ask you, well, I don't know if maybe we get into this. I don't know if we want to get into this topic. New Zealand is in the news a lot for, what is the deal with being locked down in New Zealand now? I know this is not exactly on a topic, but it's a little bit, but it's of interest because I've been reading a lot about it's unconstitutional, or I don't know what they call it, constitution, but it is ruled unethical or unsustainable to lock people down. What's the latest story about people being locked down in New Zealand?
God, I don't even read the news. I'm so sick of the whole thing. I just know we were in lockdown for like 7 weeks, and I'm an essential worker, so I could kind of move around, but it was still driving me crazy. Then they got rid of the virus, and now we are in level 2. Most of the countries in level 2, which means that we have to social distancing in the supermarkets, etc. And it doesn't really impact our lives. But Auckland is in level 3 until next week because they had a family that got infected somehow. They don't know how, so that's why they put them in lockdown. But that seems to be under control. So hopefully we will move down again and start being able to move around. But what I do know is that there is a lot of discussion around the quarantine when you come into the country. So you're allowed to leave the country, but whenever you come back, I think you have to be in quarantine for 2 weeks. And everyone is discussing who's going to pay for this. I think the government is actually paying for it right now. But people are literally, the guards are sleeping at night and people just sneak out. And that's how the infection is happening. I don't think you're going to be able to stop it long term anyway, unless you keep the borders closed forever. But that's just my personal opinion. So yeah, I'm trying to stay away from politics. I find it very frustrating, and I'll just turn into one of those that sit in front of the TV and have a lot of opinions, and obviously no one cares about what I think anyway. So just trying to stay away from that.
Yeah, it's you conjure up the old guy sitting in TV yelling at the TV. It doesn't do any good. It's kind of interesting. Let's talk about, so obviously we're at MeterX. We have a lot of people on a carnivorous diet here. It seems, and I'm going to say it seems because I can't say with 100% certainty, but I'm pretty confident saying that it seems to be that many people find that by going strictly zero carbohydrate, meat-based, that sugar addiction, carb cravings, it seems to be more effective than say just sort of routine ketogenic diets, which many people still conclude, like we talked about, the fat bombs and the sweet analogs, the keto cheesecakes and stuff like that. Do you think there's do you think there's a physiologic advantage to this approach as opposed to a standard low carb ketogenic approach?
I do. I haven't actually noticed that myself going carnivore, but I do see it in other people that they've been keto for many years and they always had these cravings, and then they go carnivore and then magically disappears. And I'm thinking, why are they not magically disappearing for me? They can do for a period of time and then they come back from nowhere. I think it has to do with, maybe, I'm just theorizing here. This is not any, research knowledge or anything. It's just me guessing. But a lot of people think that cravings can stem from brain chemical imbalance, and to create those brain chemicals you need certain amino acids, and if you eat a lot of meat, surely you will get enough of those amino acids that you need to create these brain chemicals. So I suspect that if you're eating a lot of meat, you will probably have enough of amino acids to rectify whatever deficiency you have in your brain. Now, I'm one of these people. I can't eat a lot of protein in one sitting. If I'm eating 3 meals per day, I can probably down a bunch of protein, but I could not eat a 1 pound steak in one sitting. I just physically can't get it down. So maybe it is that I'm not eating enough protein to actually get this effect that many other people do. And it's just very interesting to me how big the difference is between when, people who say that they're doing fine on a carnivore diet, but they didn't on a keto diet. And I'm thinking, what is the difference? Is it, they were still keto, so they ate a lot of fat. They weren't eating the carbohydrates and still they had the cravings. So the only answer is probably that it must be in the meat or the amount of protein, or maybe it's another nutritional deficiency that you can't cure with eating a moderate amount of protein. I have no idea, but it's just me guessing, basically. So I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other side of the equation is, obviously, meat is got some pretty good, cool compounds in it. But, when you are on a ketogenic diet, and depending how it's formulated, I mean, there's lots of ways to do a ketogenic. You can do a junk food ketogenic diet. I mean,
Sure.
you could be soybean oil and, Diet Coke and call yourself on a ketogenic diet. I mean,
Yeah.
it would technically put you in ketosis, I suppose. But so there's a lot of ways out there. But one of the things is, even a well-formulated ketogenic diet that I was on for several years, and it was, I made extreme efforts to include lots of salad, lots of spinach, lots of leafy green vegetables, because that was what I was, and then the fat and the protein and some of the other sort of ketogenic foods. Some of us are of the belief, or at least we've had experience, that by eliminating some of those foods, including the leafy green vegetables, that we have better gut function. And do you think that is there a relationship between gut function and sugar addiction? Do you think there's anything there? I mean, there's a lot of interest now in the gut. Most of it seems to stem around the microbiome, and there's some of us that think that maybe it's gut inflammation and gut permeability that also has a role, or equally, or even more so has a role. Any thoughts around gut function and those types of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're correct there. I think we don't know anything about the gut flora, basically. But there are people out there that definitely think that, the gut flora is actually in charge of our appetite and what we crave. Because if we have a lot of bacteria in our gut that basically live off carbohydrate, they will create carb cravings. So I don't, I don't know. I know that the gut flora changes when you change diet. Obviously, it has no, I mean, it has to change because it can't survive if you don't give it what it needs. So that makes all sense to me as well. It's just that I don't really know enough. Well, I don't think anyone actually knows enough about the specific gut flora that would be beneficial to cure cravings or whatever. So I think it's probably a very, very good idea to get bacteria that will function well on the diet that you eat. So maybe it is that I'm having, maybe I need to go really, really strict carnivore for a period of time to really change my gut flora, and that it's somehow kind of surviving, even though I'm mostly eating just meat. I do have some blueberries every now and then, and I'm one of these people that I feel fine if I have a cheat day. So every now and then I might have a meal out or whatever. And maybe I can't do that for a very long period of time until my gut flora is changing properly, because I still have some of those bacteria that will create those cravings. It's entirely possible. So that's a very, very good point.
Yeah, there's some that, because you point out at the beginning, we seek out energy. I mean, this is one of the whole entire points of nutrition. I mean, obviously there's a structural component, where we're fixing and building, our lean mass and even to some degree our fat, our nervous system and brain. But from when we look at how do we power this machine, it requires energy. And so, like you said, it's either carbohydrate or it's fat. Typically, protein is not really the ideal energy source for us. And so when we do see a lot of people that are thriving on I know you mentioned protein, but there are some people that are actually thriving quite well on a higher fat amount. And again, higher fat is relative for everyone, but I mean, it seems to be that people eating as much as 70, 80, even 90% fat do better in certain conditions. And I'm not sure if that's sugar addiction, and maybe people in the chat will comment on that, versus, I'm fixing metabolic disease, I'm fixing autoimmune disease, I'm fixing uh, depression or whatever. So I don't know if what your thoughts are on fat, because you mentioned protein. Of course, amino acids are precursor or required parts of neurotransmitters, but then also fat has a role in our brain function as well. So what are your thoughts on the higher fat approach?
Um, I used to think that higher fat would suit me better. I'm kind of experimenting a little bit with that myself right now. But as a general rule of thumb, it seems that women do better on higher fat than men do. I might have to take that back, because recently, for some reason, I have spoken to quite a few women that do tremendously well on a higher protein diet. So there seems to be a correlation with the anxiety, those kind of things, with higher fat though, and that is helping better than more protein. So it's entirely possible. I don't know if I want to say that I think that higher fat might be better for people with cravings, because I haven't seen any such thing. What I have seen though is just that people that go from keto to carnivore, they do a lot better with their cravings. It might be. Sorry, I don't have the answer to that. I don't know if anyone does, but I haven't really seen that the actual amount of, or the ratio between fat and protein, that it makes any difference for people with cravings. What people are talking about in general is just how they feel and the energy that they have when they change the ratios.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm looking in the chat, and there's some people that are going back and forth on that. And I think one thing, depending upon where you're coming from, I mean, certainly standard American diet or standard New Zealand diet or whatever it's going to be now is going to be relatively protein deficient to just about all forms of a carnivore diet. Even a high fat carnivore diet, probably you're getting 20% of your calories from protein, which is, our standard diet in the United States is about 12 to maybe 16% depending on which set of data you're looking at. So your protein levels are going up regardless. And then the question is, do they go up from 20? Do they go to 20%, or are they 30%? And you're still going to be looking at 70-80% fat for most people. So I think you're getting higher both of these. So it's interesting in that regard.
Yeah, there was one. Sorry,
Go ahead.
I was talking to Sally K. Norton a couple of months ago or more, and she's talking about this. I don't think she knows enough about it to want to go into too much depth, but what she's seen is that some people have mitochondrial damage from oxalates, and when they do, they can't really fat adapt. So they won't really do very well on the carnivore or a keto diet. They will actually need a little bit of carbs in the diet just to kind of get that energy going. And I'm thinking maybe there is something there that some people do better on a higher fat diet because they can't really, the gluconeogenesis might not function properly either, and they need that extra energy from the fat in the food to kind of get this satisfaction of eating, which you can't necessarily get from the protein. I don't know, but I'm just kind of spinning off what she told me, and I'm kind of wondering if there's anyone actually out there that knows more about damaged gluconeogenesis, etc. Please get in contact with me, because I'm very, very interested in that.
Yeah, so there is a fellow by the name of Nadir Ali. He's a cardiologist who I've known for a couple of years now and met. And he, there are, I guess, or at least, and we're going to have him on here I can't remember when, but fairly in the near future. And, he does say that there are some people that, due to long-term metabolic damage, they have very, very difficult times to convert over to a more ketogenic metabolic system. They struggle to get into ketosis. They struggle mightily to come off carbohydrates. And for those people, it may require a long period of time. There may be quite a bit of fasting involved for those people. These are these people that are just so metabolically damaged that it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to get them there. And so I'll try to pick his brain a little bit more on that as to what's going on at a mitochondrial level, because, I suspect, sure, the mitochondria are going to be involved to some degree for many things. I mean, they're just, obviously we have, trillions of mitochondria in our body, and they're in pretty much every cell. I think red cells don't have them, but so, we've got, that's going to have an undoubted, there's going to be an impact. Is that the least common denominator that we're looking at, the smallest, thing that we can boil it down to? Perhaps it might be interesting. So we'll see. I'm interested to see what his thoughts are on that. But it does seem that, some people find this much easier and other people struggle for a period of time. And so we're, one of the nice things about that is we can kind of just look at the community that we have here and sort of maybe sort of identify that and figure out what you need to do beyond that. Do you, and again, remind me, I mean, you said you were an essential personnel. What does your day job look like?
My day job looks like I'm working in a laboratory and I'm analyzing fish oils of all things. So I'm working in a quality control lab, making sure that the fish oil meets the required standard for our customers. So that's interesting, eh?
So we have someone in our peanut gallery asking a question, asking you about oxidation of DHA supplements. One of the things is, there's controversies. Should we take fish oil? Should we take krill oil? What's the story on omega-6, omega-3? Can you go into that? And then I want, do you have much interest or background into, saturated fats are, something that's been demonized, but the more we look into it, it's like one saturated fat is not the same as another saturated fat. Do you have much insight into that? I don't know if we go down there, but first talk a little bit about maybe oxidation of maybe some of these DHA type products.
Okay, let's do the oxidation. So you have something called primary oxidation, which happens first. And then you have another step on top of that when the oxidized fat oxidizes again, which is into a secondary state. So what I measure in the lab is both. So I measure the primary oxidation, I measure the secondary oxidation. So the primary one is bad, but it's not as dangerous as the secondary one. The secondary one can be things like aldehydes, ketones, etc. Those kind of compounds. And if you eat a lot of those, they can actually bind irreversibly to your DNA, to your proteins, anywhere in your body, where they will sit and just be disruptive. And as you can imagine, if they bind to your DNA or something, wrong place, you could get cancer. They can bind to things in your arteries. And they are foreign molecules. They're not things that your body like, and they will cause inflammation and probably damage your arteries. So we're taking these omega-3 oils because we want to, prevent cardiovascular disease in some kind or other things. So what you need to know before taking any such supplement is how oxidized is it? Because even if you eat a fish oil, for example, or an algae oil or whatever you want, that has oxidation products in them, even if it's primary ones, these oxidized fats can be incorporated into your cell membranes where they're prone to further oxidation, and they can actually keep oxidizing into these aldehydes or ketones or whatever. So there's clearly a problem with consuming these fats because they will be incorporated into your body. So you really don't want to do that. And there is no way for you to know the status of the fish oil that you're buying. You can buy a brand that is really, really expensive and it might still not be great. You don't know how it's been handled, if it's in a pill. So when we sell it, for example, we're packing it, we know exactly what the oxidation status is, and if we pack it correctly, it will actually keep fairly well. But what I will say is that there is always some degree of oxidation. You will never get an oil that isn't oxidized at all. You will never have primary oxidation or secondary oxidation, which has a value of 0. Doesn't occur. So it will always be oxidized to some degree. So we ship it away. Then we don't know what the customers are doing with it. They might put it into little pills. And who knows how they're getting into these pills? Is the oil subjected to oxygen, to light, to heat? All those things will just make the oxidation go faster and make the problem even worse. So depending on how they handle it, you might get more oxidation. So what I say is that I don't recommend anyone to eat any type of oil, because you can't create an oil without having a degree of oxidation, unless you have a problem. So I don't even eat omega-3 oils myself, even though I'd never eat seafood, because I don't like seafood. It's not anything ethical or whatever. I just don't like the taste. I'm trying to eat grass-fed beef suet instead, and I know that the omega-3 to 6 ratio isn't as great in grass-fed beef as it is in fish, but it's still pretty good. If you're going to take any omega-3 oils, I want you to take it as medicine. So if you've had, let's say, a traumatic brain injury, or there's something going on, you know that your omega-3 to omega-6 status is totally crap, or whatever it might be, I would probably take it myself for a period of time, a limited period of time, just to up my omega-3 content, to actually replenish the omega-3s in my brain while I'm kind of rebuilding my brain. I would never go and take omega-3 supplements day in, day out for years, because I think that is going to do more damage than it's doing good. I think we should use it as a medicine when there is a need for it, and not just as one of those pills that we pop because it's supposed to be good for us. That's my take on the omega-3 to omega-6s. And also remember that, we also, a lot of the time, we're talking about the ratio between omega-3s and omega-6s. If you get your omega-6s down, you try to eliminate as much omega-6s as possible from your diet, you don't need a lot of omega-3s. And I think that you can probably get enough with, if you have the proper diet. Maybe not this 1-to-1 ratio that some people are talking about, but I'm not so sure that that is necessary. Because if we're thinking back to, how did our ancestors actually eat? They didn't eat pills. They just ate whatever animals they could kill that had been eating grass. And they probably maybe had a similar, fat profile to those of cows or sheep or whatever. I don't think they had a 1-to-1 ratio either, but I haven't actually researched that, but I think that's highly unlikely, because even cows now that eat just grass, they still have slightly more omega-6s than omega-3s. But what we want to do is avoid adding those extra omega-6s into our diet, because that will screw us up.
Yeah, I think that, and again, we have to realize that the absolute requirements are not super high. I mean, you can get that, and I think the problem is, particularly, and you mentioned oils, but and this is in reference to fish oils, and somebody's asked about cod liver oil, but I mean, there's also equally these soybean oils, canola oils, corn oils that we've got that are clearly high in omega-6s, polyunsaturated fats, that clearly our ancestors were not eating, these seed oils. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. There's been some recent talk about people saying that, well, if you eat a monogastric animal like a pig, and realize that pork is the #1 consumed animal in the world today. I mean, in Asia, certainly, there's more pigs that are consumed than cows on a worldwide basis, and they've been eating pigs for, thousands upon thousands of years. Is that an issue to say that I'm eating a pig versus a cow? Is it going to cause problems, or is it more these seed oils that are in the environment? And then is cod liver oil something that's super great, or is it just like in any other oil that's subject to oxidation?
Okay, let's start with the oil because we're on oils already. I think, when you process any oil, you do certain things to it. You put it through a process where you add, caustic acid and other things, and you have to clean it, etc., and you're heating it. So any oil that is, oil is processed. You can't just take cod liver and squeeze the oil out of it by hand. It's not going to work that way. You need to use chemical processes to get it out. So it's a processed food. And as a processed food, it's not natural to start with, but then with the processing that we do, you always apply heat. We don't have, as far as I know anyway, cold pressed cod liver oil. So you're gonna run into the same problem. I know that people keep asking me like, okay, omega-3s are not good, but what about cod liver oil? I don't really understand why cod liver oil would be treated any different way. Why not eat the cod livers? Just eat cod livers, you know. So that's that. What was the other one we were talking about? I forgot.
Well, we're talking about, are we going to, because we eat pigs or chickens,
Oh yeah.
Is that going to, because they're monogastrics and they process food differently than say ruminants, is that going to lead to significant problems with, oil or I mean, I guess fats relative to maybe, actually eating them, seed, like you said, the seed oil, the processing, the 20-step process and the multiple heating and the aldehydes, is that a different situation than eating polyunsaturated fats that are maybe in a pig?
Well, okay, so pigs don't have a great omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. So I was looking at some research done before when they have pigs that eat, that don't get any supplements in terms of any grains or anything. So they totally free roaming. These pigs are taking longer to grow. They are smaller and they have a better omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. And I think from memory, it was around 8:1. So that is not too bad. However, it's really expensive for farmers to raise their pigs like this. And I know many farmers say that you can't do it on a larger scale. So you have to supplement with some grains. And as soon as you put any grains into the pig's diets, you're going to get a higher omega-6 ratio, omega-6 to 3 ratio. So you're going to get more omega-6s in the pig fat. And as we all know, pig is a very fatty meat. So usually when you eat it, unless you just eat pork chops without the fat on the side, you will probably get a lot of that. And I don't think that is a problem if you are having pork every now and then. I don't think it's a huge problem. But if you are on a budget and you decide to eat just chicken and pork because that is very cheap, chickens are very, very high in omega-6s. Chickens are birds. They do eat grains, they eat seeds, etc. Most of the time anyway. If you let them roam free and you don't give them any seeds, they might not grow very well and they will have to eat bugs and they're probably going to have a better fatty acid profile. But that's not reality. That's not what we buy in the supermarket or what we can get our hands on. So if you're only eating pork and chicken, yes, I do think you will probably have a problem. Having said that, that problem is not going to be as large as the problem that most people have from eating processed foods, because the cheapest thing that we can put into processed food is seed oils and sugar. It costs nothing, especially now if it's like high fructose corn syrup. It's dirt cheap because the government is sponsoring the farmers, and seed oils, it costs nothing. And you don't know anything about the quality to start with, but then putting that in, lots of omega-6s. If you read any label on any processed food that you're buying, and there is any type of fat in there, that will be a seed oil of some kind. It will never say lard or butter. And if it does, it will also have vegetable oil on it probably.
Yeah, that's, when you look at the, I mean, back in 1940, before World War II, you might have found foods with lard in it. That's when we kind of stopped doing that, because the lard actually went into the munitions and the war machine, and they sort of started pouring more of the some of the seed oils in all the foods. I mean, I think that was a big impetus. American Heart Association started recommending Crisco in the 1920s, or I believe in the 20s, but thanks to $1.5 million grant from Procter and Gamble. But so that's good to put that into perspective. So you're saying if you eat lots of pig, you're going to have a higher omega-6 omega-3 ratio relative to if you eat just a moderate amount, and then certainly the seed oils are a much bigger issue than I think people would say. Do you get into or know anything about the different types of saturated fat? We've got there's short chain, there's medium chain, there are long chain fats. Long chain fats, depending on what they are, don't seem to raise cholesterol levels as much in theory, at least according to my reading, and it depends on perhaps the type. Palmitic acid seems to be more problematic than, say, stearic acid, and some of these medium chains like lauric and caprylic and capric and caproic acid seem to be maybe better. And I don't know, and everybody seems to be enamored with the short chain fatty acids, the butyrates and acetates and propionates. But does that anything that you have much knowledge on?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think I've probably avoided that subject because it's so complicated and you need to do a lot of reading, and there's so many different type of saturated fatty acids that do different things. So I'm probably not the right person to ask about that. But I would like to add something to my previous comment, actually. If any of you are familiar with a guy called Nick Patterson, he lives in Finland right now. I think he bought a lot of pork that was it was on offer, so he ate pork for several weeks straight, and he started to feel really, really bad. So there's definitely something to that, and that's the only person I've actually spoken to that has experienced that. But just keep that in mind. If you've been eating a lot of pork and chicken for a period of time and you don't feel optimal, just try to change to a different type of fat and see if that actually helps. It could be that. So sorry about that, but that's not quite my expertise. The long chain, short chain, medium chain saturated fatty acids.
Yeah, and I think that's good, and I think most people that do this carnivore diet, we've always stressed ruminant meat. I think that's been the thing, and the question that I sort of look at is, when we look at like large populations in Asia, which in many cases, maybe not so much today because they've kind of westernized their diet more, but they have a long history of pork consumption, and they have tended to have better metabolic outcomes than, say, Americans, and whether that's because they're not eating all the sugar and seed oils, or the pork is a minimal, maybe it's not as good as beef, but it's not as bad as sugar and that type of stuff. So it's interesting to look at those populations and say, well, why aren't these guys all sick from eating all the pig meat that they do? The Okinawans that, the island of pork, and the Japanese and Chinese. If you go to Japan and China, pork is ubiquitous for sure. Somebody wanted to ask, I think it was one other question somebody wanted to ask before let's see, what was that? Organs. There are a number of people that will say that you must eat organs to be healthy. There's a number of people, including people in this place, that don't eat them and seem to be doing fine. So what's the story on organ consumption? Is it absolutely necessary for everyone, or is it an individual decision? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a very, very good idea to include organs. Whether you can survive without them or not, yeah, I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can feel great without them. Organs are just very, very nutrient dense. So if you eat shitloads of meat, that is a technical term, by the way, then I'm sure that you can get pretty much everything that you need without the organs. I don't know if you're familiar with Sylvia Tabor. I can't remember her handle, but we were talking, and she has found that when she's eating a lot of meat, she's fine. But if she's eating a higher fat diet, she has to include a lot more organ meats to actually feel okay. So I think it has to do with the total amount of nutrients that you're actually getting in. So I'm sure that you can do perfectly fine if you eat enough of those nutrients. But if you want to be, if you're already nutrient deficient, or if you don't eat enough meat, then you probably will do a lot better with the organs. And I can absolutely understand if you don't want to do organs. I'm not an organ person. I've made some good liver pate finally that I can eat, but it's still not my favorite food. I do try to eat it every now and then, but I can't eat, huge amounts of liver. But I'm doing my best because I think it's good. Not necessarily necessary for everyone to do that if you are fulfilling those requirements anyway.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think, like I said, I've been doing this stuff for quite some time now. I'm not much of an organ person. I'll have a little bit, maybe in a sausage, like a Braunschweiger sausage or a liverwurst sausage. Again, my thought is if you're going to do it, make a pate, put it in sausage, rather than, desiccate it and put it in a gelatin pill, which I think is I don't know if that's the best way to do that, quite honestly. I think you just figure out a way to eat it if you think you need it in your diet. But that's my take on that. When I look at the community, and I've one of the few people that's actually taken the time to actually survey people and really go to this. And we did a survey, I don't know, it wasn't quite a year ago, but we got 12,000 people to respond in just over 24 hours. And about 15% were eating organ meats on a regular basis, and then 85% were either eating them extremely rarely or infrequently or even not at all. So it was just kind of interesting to see. And the results, the outcomes with regard to how do you feel and, overall and in various categories and medications, it didn't seem to make a big difference. So that's just my observation. But I agree. I mean, there's no doubt that, there's more nutrition per cubic centimeter in a piece of liver than there is in a ribeye. There's no doubt about it. The question is it necessary for everybody, and then for how long is that necessary? There's people that have been doing this for 10 plus years, and most of them will say, I don't eat organ meats, didn't really feel the need to. And I do agree that if you get enough meat in the diet, then it may not be an issue, and it may be a temporal thing where initially, particularly if you're coming from a really horrible junk food diet, standard American diet, where you've got nutrient deficiencies, or a plant-based diet where you develop nutrient deficiencies, that early on, that sort of brings you up to level quicker. So I wanted to, I don't want to take too much more time, but I do want to ask one other thing, because you talked about these oils becoming permanently attached to DNA and membranes, as we've got this lipid bilayer, this phospholipid bilayer that makes up all our cell membranes. But we've got, so, again, when you say it's permanently attached, I mean, that I guess that's until the cell turns over, there's some type of autophagy, mitophagy, lysosomal destruction of, but eventually that clears out. And do you have an idea how long these things time in residence? I've seen studies out there about oxidized omega-6 fatty acids, if we biopsy humans and we biopsy their fat, we can see this stuff, and it may be even there for several years. But what has been your experience with that?
As far as I know, the half-life, which means that half of the fats are going to be gone, is roughly 8 to 10 years, something like that, which will depend a little bit on, what organ it is. If it's sitting in your intestine, it's just going to be a few days, but if it's somewhere else, it might be a lot longer. So we're talking about the half-life to clear out all of the fats that you ate. So yes, many, many years. So I haven't eaten much seed oils. I mean, I probably consume them whenever, if I go out for a meal, etc. I'm not, militant about that. I just go for it. I can't be bothered. I don't have a problem just eating the food that they serve at the restaurant, but I'm aware that they probably put seed oils in there. So those are going to be in there for a very long time. But I've been keto since, or low carb of some sort, for over 10 years. So hopefully my cells are not too bad, but I imagine that I still have some fats that are not ideal from my previous life. So it's a very long, recovery time if you want to clear them all out. But hopefully we don't have to wait 10 years to feel better, because it's all happening, over time. But it's a slow process. Yeah. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, and again, obviously, when you talk about half-life, let's assume you're not continuing to eat these things, because then it's just deposited. And so what we see, and I've heard from people that have been doing this, sort of carnivore diet, that they continue to notice improvements for many years, and so that may be part of the reason why, is they're continuing to clear these, these oils and other compounds that have accumulated. Anyway. Pim, we've gone an hour. That's usually that's usually all I hold my guests hostage to. So, so thank you so much. I appreciate your time and willingness to chat with us. I know it's not the best time zone for making these things, but you're already on Saturday, so that's a good thing. So maybe you don't have to go to work after this. You can go back to sleep, maybe, perhaps. But where can people find out more about you, or do you have some social media that you care to talk about?
So since we're on YouTube, the best way for you to get in touch with me is probably just Google my name, which is Pim Jansson. You can probably see it on the screen. And you will get to my YouTube channel, which is called Keto Carnivore Perspectives. And from there, you'll probably find other links to other social media, but that's probably the easiest way of doing it. You can also find me on Twitter or Instagram, where I go on the Life Without Cravings, or Life WO Cravings on Twitter, because Life Without Cravings is too long. So yeah, thank you, Shawn. It was great to be here. It's very interesting to see all these people in the background doing things. It's not distracting at all. So I just want to say that you're doing a really good job, and I'm really happy that you're actually taking charge of things and trying to get some studies up and going. So if people want to support that kind of thing, I think definitely look into that. If you want to donate money to something, I think that is a very, very good cause, because the way we are going now in society is just like we're rolling down the hill very, very quickly with all the new government regulations and governments trying to take charge of people's lives and what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And diet's going to be in there at some point, so it's better to act now. So thank you for doing that.
Well, yeah, I think it needs to be done, and thanks for the sort of promotion on that, because yeah, it's something that I think if we don't actively take a role and become passive, we're not going to like where the results go. So anyway, thank you, Pim, and everybody in the chat. Thank you guys for the questions. Happy the weekend's coming up, so enjoy it. I'll see some of you guys Saturday otherwise, and take care, and give Bart a big kiss for us, or pop him upside the head, or whatever's appropriate. All right, you guys take care, and we'll see you guys later. Good talking to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.